Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Katerina Schray, along with co-host Dr. Victor Fett and our program producer, Professor Larry Schray. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally, and we very much appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you are joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post questions for our guest. A quick greeting to our viewers in Ukraine. Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким поклоном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі. And today's guests will be introduced by Dr. Victor Fett. The rest of us will turn off our cameras and let's begin.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Welcome to our 115th weekly meeting of Ukraine Discussion Group. Welcome today our local journalist publisher, John Patrick Grace from Huntington, West Virginia. Patrick is former foreign correspondent in Rome for the Associated Press and also vice president of Sunflower Seeds Tri-State Aid for Ukraine. Mr. Grace agreed to talk to us about his visit to the very important meeting in Washington, D.C. On April 13-16th, there was a Ukraine Action Summit. Please, Mr. Grace, microphone is yours.
Yes, hi, and greetings to everyone. I wish I could say a little more than Slava Ukraine, but that's about the limit of my Ukrainian. This is an organization based in Washington, D.C. that had the good idea of reaching out to local Ukraine support groups across the United States and Canada, I believe, and invite them to Washington for what they call an Action Summit meeting, which went on over 2 days at a very good hotel, the Royal Sonesta Hotel in Washington, D.C., near Union Station. So there were Ukrainians, there were Americans who could speak Ukrainian, there were people from distinguished universities, there were activists, there were people who had been in the war. It was all in all a very impassioned and exciting gathering. And it was wonderful to be in a room of about 250 people, of men and women of various ages from various locations, all of whom shared one passion, and that was to defend Ukraine and Ukrainian democracy on behalf not only of Ukraine, but of democracies everywhere in the world. We also were coached on lobbying our congressional representatives in the House of Representatives for the critical vote that did in fact succeed in releasing $61 billion of military and other aid from the United States to Ukraine to continue Ukraine's defense of their statehood, their people, and their democracy. So I went to see Representative Alex Mooney in his office. He wasn't there, but I met with his staff and made a very strong plea for him to vote in favor of the aid for Ukraine. Also went to see the office of Representative Carol Miller. These are 2 West Virginia congressional representatives. Again, did not see her. In fact, she was in a committee meeting in the House of Representatives, but I met with her staff. They were very welcoming, very attentive. They shared my concern for Ukraine, and in fact, Carol Miller did vote for that package to Ukraine. She was one of the Republicans that voted for it. It was a very good experience. I'd never done any lobbying of that kind before, but I was particularly happy to lobby on behalf of Ukraine. Back at the meeting at the hotel, we had a whole series of panels. It was almost like a blitzkrieg. We had one panel after another. Wonderful people. I learned a couple of things that I did not know at all, and I try to follow the war. I try to follow news reports about Ukraine as much as I can, but I learned that Russia under Putin has adopted a policy of what was called ecocide. Ecocide means a deliberate attempt to kill the ecology of a country, in this case, Ukraine, trying to do things chemically and otherwise to kill the ecology. And they were also apparently attempting to kill the ecology of other European countries, notably Germany. Ecocide, I'd never heard that before. It was a brand new thing on my radar scope. I also learned that Russia has an ongoing policy of torturing and killing Christians in Russia, not only in Ukraine, but also in Russia. Apparently over 1,000 Christians have already been victims of this kind of persecution. They obviously would not be Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. They would be of some other Christian denomination, I would assume. That was not made clear, but that there is a policy of perhaps capturing Christians who are in support of Ukraine inside Russia and torturing them and even killing them. Those two things were brand new to me. I had no idea. I had one criticism of the summit, and that was that although they brought all these people together from maybe 30 states, there was no real effort to bring national media into the summit. I heard one speaker after another saying things that were newsworthy, and yet where was CNN? Where was the Wall Street Journal? Where was the New York Times? Where was the Washington Post? I don't think there was a single national journalist at the meetings over the 2 days. And I volunteered to help them strategize media and get media to these kinds of events because, and I was only one of 3 people that made that remark to them that they need to do a better job of bringing media into these kind of high-powered meetings. We had lunch together. There were many congenial conversations. People around the country are doing amazing things. There are other groups that are doing just about what we're doing here at Sunflower Seeds. Notably, I think the group in Toledo, Ohio, which is to say raising money and raising awareness, buying food, clothing, supplies, medical materials, and other aids, and managing to get them to Ukrainian refugees. In the case of Sunflower Seeds, as everybody on the broadcast today realizes, we are working through a group in Orange, France. We send them money. They use the money to buy supplies, put them on trucks right in Orange, and the trucks go to Yaroslav, Poland, on the Ukrainian border, where thousands of Ukrainian refugees are huddled. And we also have learned that people from Ukraine have come into that depot in Yaroslav and gotten supplies, including medicalized backpacks, things of that nature that they can use to cope amid the war. So we're in effect supplying not only Ukrainian refugees, but also in some cases Ukrainians who are engaged in the war currently. All of which I shared as much as I could. We were allowed to share what each group was doing, so certainly shared that. And other groups were doing also very powerful things. One of the most powerful groups that presented there, I thought, was the group from Portugal. They came all the way from Portugal to set up a display. They have a whole hospital in Portugal where they bring Ukrainians from the war that have been injured and maybe have mental conditions that need to be treated. Big building, and they're doing that kind of work, making a hospital in Portugal available to Ukrainians who've been affected by the war. So many exciting developments. And Victor, I have a lot of business cards from various organizations around the country I want to share with you so that you can maybe take a look at them and see what each organization is doing and invite people onto the podcast from wherever they are. Oh, there's one other thing.
Yeah.
Outside the hotel, right outside that hotel in Washington, the Royal Sonesta near Union Station, I came upon a memorial placed there by the U.S. Park Service, which is under the Department of the Interior, and it was a memorial to something I had never heard of before. It's Holodomor. Victor, I'm sure you know about Holodomor, but it is not taught in American universities very well. I had a course at Loyola University Chicago on 20th century European history, and Holodomor never came up. Holodomor is a word that means starving by, killing by starvation, wiping people out through a campaign of starvation. And apparently in the 1930s, Stalin enacted a policy of Holodomor against the Ukrainian people. I'm just going to read you part. I wrote a column about this for our newspaper here, the Herald Dispatch. The word Holodomor means death by starvation or famine. The atrocity the marker memorializes is the man-made famine promoted under Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to punish Ukrainians in the 1930s for refusing to knuckle under to Kremlin demands that they, quote, return to serfdom and supply grain for other Soviet states, even at the expense of compromising their own need for food. The Holodomor killed between 3.3 and 5 million Ukrainians, men, women, and children, in the years 1932 to 33. It was also intended to crush Ukrainian national culture and pride. It has been ruled as a genocide by Ukraine and 33 other United Nations members. At one point, the Holodomor claimed 28,000 lives a day. I searched my memory to recall when this terrible pogrom had ever come up, and I could not even remember a single instance, including in the course in 20th century European history that I took. Still, we will ignore at our peril the celebrated quote from philosopher George Santayana: "Those who cannot remember the past or history are doomed to repeat it." So I have no doubt that if he could, and if it came to that, Vladimir Putin would enact something similar to Holodomor to continue his brutal campaign against Ukraine today. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible weapon of war, but death by starvation.
Thank you, Patrick, for drawing our attention to that memorial. That is, in fact, a very powerful memorial, and I think our regular listeners have heard a little bit about the Holodomor before from previous guests, including several experts on it. Victor, would you like to elaborate on that? I know that we've definitely had people speak about it, but thank you for bringing that to the attention, and thank you for tying it into the idea of war on the ecosystem, because these are two very unconventional, terrifying ways of stomping out a group of people. Oh, Victor, you're muted.
Thank you, Patrick, for remembering this. In fact, I'm sure that not maybe everyone on the other side of the Atlantic knows about this memorial. Holodomor for Ukrainians is essentially bears the same memory as Holocaust for the Jews, and both are genocidal events which happened, I'm afraid to say, first in the Soviet Union, as Ukraine was starved. The similar events went on in Central Asia, in other places, as the Soviet state tried to establish itself by iron rule of Stalin and put a so-called policy of collectivization. At this time, I'm afraid, quite lauded and welcomed by many American left-wing politicians at the same time. It might be this inconsistency in interpreting Soviet history which makes us here still lopsided in terms of assessing what is going on right now at this very moment in the Ukrainian and Russian history. But thank you for bringing us the news on the summit. I already see a question here, a hand raised, please. Dr. Dutch.
For Mr. Grace. Carol Miller voted in favor of funding for Ukraine. You went to Alex Mooney's office too. You didn't talk to him directly, but how did that conversation go? I don't think he wound up voting in favor. And what were
No.
the points that were made during the conversation with his representatives?
Well, I talked to his foreign affairs expert, and named Cotton, and he was young. He had a security background. He had actually worked in private security before joining Mooney's staff. So I thought he particularly would be sensitive to the need to reinforce the Ukrainians at this critical point in the war. And that's essentially the point I made, that the Ukrainians are defending not only their democracy, but our democracy and democracy writ large everywhere in the world. And that if Ukraine collapses, it would have catastrophic consequences for the rest of Europe. And we, the United States, would have to be involved in another war, which could turn into World War III. So I made those kinds of points with him. He listened. He did not counter any of that. He did not seem to offer any strong affirmations of that either. So that's where it stood. And he thanked me for coming and said he would convey all of that to, Representative Mooney, who is now running for the United States Senate in our state. So not the person I would want to see in the Senate, but in any case, that's the long and short of it.
How did Mooney vote on that issue?
I failed to check myself. I did check Carol Miller. I don't know why I didn't check Mooney, but I think you're right that he probably voted against it. His attitude toward Ukraine is such that it's likely he voted against it.
I just wonder what the rationale he offered was for not voting in favor of something that so obviously needs to be done.
Well, since the vote passed, it's kind of water under the bridge at this point, but we could check and see.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I actually met with Mooney's office, and he did not vote at all. He was the one person in the vote that just sat out. But his office was very resistant to meeting with us. But they did kindly meet with us. We met with one of his staffers, and it was not a very productive meeting. He really wasn't very interested in anything we were trying to share with him. And
do you remember his name? If it was the same person I talked to, he was more interested in what I had to say.
Yeah,
Lee Cotton, I believe his full name is Lee Cotton.
Oh no, that wasn't who we met with.
Okay.
No, we met with just one of his staffers. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But it was better. It could have gone worse. I'll say that.
Well, Lee Cotton actually, I'd say, showed a reasonable interest in what I was talking about and the points I was making. So he did have a security background. So from that perspective, I could address his security background.
Thank you. I need to introduce Pamela. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Pamela Hines from Morgantown, who runs Gold and Blue United and was previously on our podcast, also visited this meeting, and we are eager to hear from you, Pamela, if you can talk to us right now for a while, just about your impressions and what was the best thing about the meeting. Of course, it preceded immediately, I think within a week, the most important vote of this year, vote of Senate, of Congress support for Ukraine's those $60 billion program, which was delayed due to all kinds of bickering issues. So please talk to us, Pamela.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very rewarding experience. I really enjoyed every minute of it. I've met some amazing people who, like me, just jumped into this when the war started and wanted to help. I had no idea there were this many people that did what I did, and we're all working together now. I met with this girl named Elle, who's about my age, a little younger than me, and she started something called Renegade Resolutions. And it is, they run humanitarian aid to the front line of Ukraine, mostly in Kharkiv, but they have served over 120 oblasts and across Ukraine. They've sent over 150 tons of humanitarian aid, and they work with people in Poland. So it was just so rewarding for me to meet so many people who are just have this passion to help Ukrainians through this. And meeting with the congressmen and women, I was on a team. I have a short video to share with you guys too that I created to kind of summarize my trip. But we met with Virginia senators and congressmen and women, and a few of the meetings that really stuck out were meetings with Congresswoman Kiggins' office and Congresswoman McClellan. They were very kind. They were on the border of what they were going to do. And it seems, Kiggins actually said to us that she would vote yes in favor of all of the, because we were there for the discharge petition originally, because as we were there, you know, Mike Johnson put the bill up and said, okay, we will go ahead. So then from there, the meetings that followed the next day, we kind of led with, other bills that we were trying to get yeses on, such as the repo bill. And we really were taken back by Kiggins and how she said, after meeting with you guys, we would like to go ahead. And it was my team. I really enjoyed the team that I was with, and it was very rewarding in so many ways. And I was really grateful to you, Victor, for connecting me with Marion, and her connecting me with Roxalana and the amazing people that run everything for this summit. And it's something I suggest everybody who has a passion for Ukraine and wants to get more done and help in so many ways, that this is next year. I'm looking forward to the next year. I'll go
Thank you.
screen with you guys.
Please.
Mm. I don't know where it went. I'm sorry.
While you're looking for it, let me just that's fantastic. The fact that you actually persuaded someone to adopt a position favorable to Ukraine on this is no small accomplishment. Thank you so much for your advocacy, your passion, your courage, your time, your energy, your investment. Thank you very much. That's impressive.
Thank you. I'm like I said, I can't say enough how rewarding it was, and that I'm so excited for next year. I hope and pray every day that this war ends by then, and it is more of a collaboration, restoring Ukraine and how we can continue to do more. That's my hope and prayer every day for that. But until then, we just keep on and keep going.
Thank you, Pamela. We have questions as you are looking for the video.
Yeah.
Maybe we have questions, please. Whose hand is up? Not sure. Please open and ask. Yes, Carol?
Hi, everyone. Let me take my hand down.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you, Pamela and Patrick, for what you've done and taking the time to go to Washington, D.C. I have learned from some advocacy efforts on my own part on having to do with trauma and trauma therapy, that a visit to your representatives in Washington, D.C. can make an enormous difference. And it is somewhat surprising to realize how much of an impact those visits actually hold. And Pamela, your experience of the representative telling you that your advocacy changed their vote was actually fairly rare. You don't get to know it ahead of time, what that was like.
No.
Yeah.
So that was tremendous that you did that. And it's also tremendous that this is evidently going to happen again next year. And hopefully, if I am available, I would like to go. I live in Charleston and I work for Marshall University. You can find me in the Marshall University website. Just look for my name
Okay.
and you can find my address, my email address. Um, Also, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Vladimir Putin bomb the Holodomor Memorial in Ukraine with his very first act?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember hearing that because I caught that memorial. My brother came to DC to surprise me while I was there, and he was standing outside while I was one of the conferences, and he caught that memorial outside the Royal Sonesta as well. And when I came back outside, he showed it to me, and I was blown away. I'd never heard of it. It's devastating, and it is, if the world wasn't responding to what's going on there right now on this level, I really do believe that it would happen again. So it's definitely, we don't want history to repeat itself. And that was a very tragic thing I learned. But
I just added a news article to the chat, following up on Holodomor and also the attack on the Holodomor Memorial.
Yeah, I could send this article to everybody. It was Tuesday, April 23rd, that my column appeared in the Herald Dispatch, and it focused on Holodomor. I also talked about the Action Summit, but most of my column was a lot of my column was devoted to the Holodomor, because I would say 99% of Americans have never heard of this.
Unfortunately not.
I think there's
Thank you,
more.
Patrick.
Yeah, I do think that it's becoming more. I mean, there's as people get more and more educated, I do think it's different from my generation. In my generation, we of course all knew it. It's first thing one of the first things we learned about in Ukrainian school, like in Saturday Ukrainian school, we do hear about it. We have remembrances for it every year, various churches, various walks in remembrance of. So it is a very, very big thing within the Ukrainian emigre community. Um, but I do think as my generation grew up and started interacting more and going to university and things like that, I do think there's more information out about it now. Several excellent books, a great film. I think Robert Conquest. I can't remember exactly. If anybody anybody else remembers the names, please call them out. But I'll put some in the chat as soon as I stop talking. But I do think there is more awareness now of that awful, awful tragedy beyond just Ukrainians knowing about it. But Patrick, thank you for spreading the word. It's important.
The numbers of people killed in that Holodomor are just mind-boggling. 3.5 to 5 million Ukrainians died in Holodomor. Yeah. It's just amazing.
Well, and the type of deaths are awful. We have stories like in our family. My family's not from that specific geographic area, but families spread over it, and you have friends and people you grew up with, and there's stories of how, for when dignitaries were visiting, they would put out tables filled with loaves of bread just to kind of show, look, there's plenty of food. But the minute the dignitaries would leave, the food would be removed and counted. And God forbid someone took a loaf to feed their kid, they would face terrible consequences. So there's all sorts of horrible stories. Tons of photographic documentation too of this tragedy is now available online. It's been well researched. And so again, thank you for writing about it in your column this week.
Thank you. Pamela, we can see your screen. If you share video with us, we will see it.
All right.
Please.
I was asked to represent West Virginia this year at the American Coalition for Ukraine's Ukraine Action Summit. Over 500 people were in attendance from 47 states. Together we stood in front of all of our representatives from each state to show our concern for the state of Ukraine. We met with House representatives and senators from each state. I was blessed to be a part of an amazing team who worked diligently for Ukraine. We got to hear from some pretty amazing people, such as the U.S. Ambassador for Ukraine, as well as the mothers of the fallen American soldiers who gave their lives in Ukraine fighting this atrocious war. The Capitol was beautiful. It was my first time ever seeing D.C., and it was truly amazing. The history and meaning behind each of these buildings and how they stand for the democracy that is our nation is enough to remind us all that we need to stand beside Ukraine through this time in their fight for freedom. Overall, the experience was something I'll never forget, and I was so honored to represent West Virginia and be a part of such a big movement for Ukraine. And I look forward to attending next year. Slava Ukraini.
So
Slava.
yes, it was absolutely amazing. I really am grateful to you for connecting me with everyone. And the video, I know I messed up. I said the U.S. ambassador for Ukraine instead of Ukraine's ambassador for the U.S., but I just wanted to correct that. I can't edit the video once it's been, posted. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed it, and thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Pamela. If you can stop sharing your screen now, we could probably see you. If your camera is open. Yes. And I need to mention again that Pamela's organization, Golden Blue United, is sending enormous amount of material help to Ukraine, to Ukrainian children. And also one of our professors, Bonita Lawrence, was in charge of ladies knitting club here in Huntington, and Pamela helped her to ship 200 knitted winter caps to Ukraine, and we heard wonderful news that they have been gladly accepted. So this way, a little drop of help from very enthusiastic people all over the United States, should I say, is absolutely required and wonderful. And we thank Pamela once again for joining us here. Do we have more questions, please, to Pamela or Patrick?
I wish I'd known that she was there. I thought I was the only person from West Virginia at the Action Summit, but there were two of us.
We tried to find someone because it was on a short notice.
Probably having lunch at adjacent tables and didn't even know that the other one was there.
Probably.
Yes. So, Katerina, please.
Patrick and also Pamela, I'd be curious to see if what you've learned about this as well. At the very beginning, Patrick, you talked about the war on the ecosystem, and you used a very specific term, which I failed to write down. Can you please remind us of that term? The type of war that targets the environment. It was eco something.
Ecocide.
Ecocide. Yeah. So I think we all have assumptions about what that could look like, but I'm wondering if you all were if there was any details about like what exactly, what are some that I almost hate the fact that I'm asking this.
Here's one thing. See, there was two breaking news stories out of that summit, and I don't think either of them made national news because they did not bring national news organizations into the meeting. I think they could have. Those people all have lots to do, but certainly somebody should have been there, NPR or Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. The two big stories were ecocide, which I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
And there were some details given by the person that talked about it, but I didn't write all of them down. I didn't write any of them down, as a matter of fact. So we can look it up. And the other one was the idea that there's a campaign of torturing and killing Christians inside Russia, apparently Christians that are opposed to the war in Ukraine. So they wouldn't be Russian Orthodox. They'd be other kinds of Christians, I'm sure. Those two stories, I think, were worth national news attention, and neither of them got out.
Oh, thank you. Pamela, was that your takeaway too, that these were like the two big stories, the two big headlines, or were there others as well?
Yes, I met with Senator Joe Manchin's office, and we actually had the woman who, I'm blanking on her name. I want to say Valerie, but I don't think that's it. Natalia. She said that she wanted to personally tell them these experiences that she knows of these soldiers and the Christians that are being persecuted all over Ukraine and in Russia. And I wasn't personally there for the ministry, the interfaith on Friday. I wasn't able to get there until Saturday. So I missed that whole thing. But just speaking with her, I got most of the information that she shared, and some of the stories are absolutely horrible, and it's being swept under the rug, and that's something, like Patrick said, should be in national news. Every one of the stories, they're um, very powerful, and I really hope that she gets to speak at more conventions and more places to get the word out on what's going on there.
Wow. You mentioned speaking to Senator Joe Manchin. He is such a great champion for Ukraine, and unapologetically in support. And he gets it. He understands it's not Russia versus Ukraine. It's Putin versus ultimately the West. And so he actually gets he does view our program from time to time. And so, Senator Manchin, if you're watching, thank you so much for all of your championing this really important cause. Did you get to meet with Senator Manchin as well?
Unfortunately, the senators all got called into that impeachment trial the day, like it was literally an hour before we were supposed to meet him.
Oh dear.
Yeah, he said he was very sorry, and he really did want to meet with us, but it was not in his will, in his power. So, we had good meetings with his staffers though, and they informed us of everything. I mean, they informed us of stuff we didn't even know Joe Manchin was doing behind the scenes. I mean, he's stuff that the media doesn't cover. Nobody's asked him about it. He just does it, and it's very good work. And he's helping on the military front, on the humanitarian aid front, in all aspects that he possibly can. So we thanked him. We gave him a gift, and he said that, and next time we're in Washington, just drop in. So,
well, thank you for that update. That's really good to know. Very good to know. I'm not sure if Dean Deutsch has his hand up or if that is a previous icon.
Yes, please, more questions.
No, that is a previous icon.
Okay, thank you.
if you don't mind, if I ask Patrick, what team did Roxalana and Jim have? Who was your team leader?
It was just me.
Oh, you weren't
I
put on.
I wasn't put on a team. No, I just went myself to. I didn't have that. I never downloaded that app, and so I never got corralled into any of that organization. I just went to the House office buildings and found those offices, and I did run into a lot of people from the Action Summit in the corridors from Arizona and Ohio and all over the place. They were doing the same thing, lobbying their representatives. But if I'd known you were there, we could have gone together on some of these things.
Yeah, next year we have all next year. There's
next year. Well, let's hope the war is over by then, as you say.
Yeah, but
there's
so much work to be done. So
there's so much work to be done.
Yeah.
Well, so here's a good opportunity for us though, because the way up until now, I've assumed this was very much like a conference. You go, there are speakers, you have a chance to network and stuff. But the fact that you have team leaders, it sounds like this was a little bit more organized, or perhaps a slightly different format than a traditional conference would be. And all of us here in academia, we all have kind of a very kind of a general sense of what conferences look like. This sounds like it was actually different than a conference. Could you go into the mechanics, go into the infrastructure of it? So how did that work?
So yeah, with Raise Them for Ukraine and a couple other organizations that I'm blanking on at the moment, but they all, with the American Coalition, worked with each state. So they broke it down into states, then they broke it down into districts. And your district had a team leader. Now, because I was representing the districts of West Virginia by myself, I was put on another team for Virginia. So my team, I was actually on 3 teams. So I got to work with every 3 districts in Virginia and go to all their senators' office and their congressmen and women. We met with Mark Warner. It was absolutely wonderful. I'd never honestly been in the realm of Virginia's politics and their representatives, so I had no idea who he was, but he was, very kind to us and very excited to see what we were doing, and told us all about what he was doing behind the scenes too. And it makes me very happy to see that there are representatives who are standing up for Ukraine.
You mentioned Razum as an organization, and I just want to read off the other sponsors of this American Coalition for Ukraine, of this event, this summit, Ukraine Action Summit. They include Razum, Together for Ukraine, And then the Ukrainian National Women's League of America. That organization has been active for decades. I grew up and they were in existence. Organization United Help Ukraine. And then we have the Ukrainian Self-Reliance Federal Credit Union, which, by the way, is my bank. And the Ukrainian American Coordinating Council. I mean, that's actually really exciting. The Ukrainian American Coordinating Council, Met Global, the U.S. Ukraine Business Council, an organization called YESPO, organization called Pine, an organization called Basecamp. So quite a broad representation. And these are, from what I understand, are just the major sponsors. So thank you for explaining how this was different. This seemed to be more, in addition to being a conference where information is shared, very much an action, very much a very organized action with obviously concrete results. So bravo, great job. This is fantastic.
Yeah, when they said action, they meant it, because we were
Yeah.
on the move all day, every day, from the time we got up to the time we went to bed. We were all meeting and learning, and then they had an amazing after party type thing to celebrate once the new vote was going to go through. So it was.
So did you have to set up the individual meetings with the representatives, or was that done for you?
Our team leader did that. So
Great.
they organize, and these people are amazing because they do this all on volunteer work. They do not get paid for this. They do this all in their time, spreadsheet after spreadsheet of organizing people and organizing meetings, and it was something else. And I was asked to be a team leader next year for the state of West Virginia, and hopefully we can get a really good team together and be able to go down there and see what we can get done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yes, Dean Deutsch.
Pam, you indicated that there were 3 states that didn't participate. Did you get a sense of why there was no representation from 3 states?
Yeah, so we had heard that it was a matter of people that wanted to come, but they couldn't afford to make that kind of trip right now. So there were people who just, I was blessed. My brother sponsored me to be able to go to this trip, but not everybody has that, and it was just a matter of income.
Thank you so much, and we're so proud that you were offered to be a team leader for next summit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not the first Ukraine Action Summit, right? They did have one last year. No?
Yes,
I think it may be even the third kind of meeting. Maybe the first was just among organizers. They said it was the third Action Summit.
We were contacted through initiative which is called Empathy for Ukraine. That's through Mariana Epstein in Boston, who is in charge of this volunteer organization who sends around stories translated into English to educate basically anyone across the world. And we have been, I have been volunteering and sending around those stories for 2 years or so. Mariana, in fact, is right now in Ukraine making a trip to see her contacts there. She was born in Vinnytsia, Ukraine, and was a well-known dissident in her time. And we are so glad to have had her on this podcast and for her recommendation for our people to join the summit. Do we have more questions or comments from the panel or viewers, please? We have very good representation today, and we're so happy that Patrick and Pamela could join us. Here is the thank you from Dean Somerville, our former College of Science Dean, Chuck Somerville, thanking in chat Pamela and Patrick for informative and inspiring messages and for the work that you are doing. He asks if you can share information on how we might be able to join the West Virginia team for next year. I'm sure Pamela has our contacts, and as soon as the work starts, please inform us, and we will see how we can put together anyone who wants to go. As far as I understand, you just register online, and there may be I don't know if there is limited number of participants, but surely it's open event, free it's not free of charge. You need to register, but it's available to everyone.
Yes, and we're going to be
And
starting planning in the fall. So I'll be
Mhm.
sure to reach out to you so we can get everybody here a mass email. And if anyone would like to join, yeah, absolutely welcome.
It's wonderful, and I remind our viewers who may be even outside of United States that it's not a trivial thing. That's how it works. The participation, the lobbying, if you wish. That's how it starts from the very grassroots level, from basically you hear it from your friends, that from people you know, that something is going on, and you're available to join. Basically, it's the way it should work. Thank you so much, Pamela. We're very glad and proud to have you. This was Pamela Hines of Golden Blue United of Morgantown, West Virginia, which is just, by the way, in the middle between our town and the capital, Washington, D.C., closer to D.C. Thank you, Patrick. Any more words or comments from
Well, I
the
think
viewers?
Pamela and Carol Smith and I ought to meet maybe in Charleston, because I guess all three of us would be part of that next year's delegation. If I'm still able, I'm 81 years old, Pam. So
Let's hope that
the
the war will be. Let's hope that the war will be
war will be
over.
over. Yeah.
And
You can come meet at my house. You don't have to pay for a hotel room.
Okay.
I'll feed you.
Good. Well,
Thank you.
I don't even need an overnight stay unless we're going to meet for 2 days, because I live in Huntington. But
Yeah.
I'm sure Pamela would be happy to have an overnight stay if we met together there in Charleston.
I'm just offering. I'm just offering. Yeah.
You teach at
Thank
Marshall
you.
in Charleston?
I teach on the South Charleston campus.
Okay.
And I want to loop back to, and thank you, Larry Sheree, for putting the link in the chat to the article about how Christian leaders have been killed or disappeared in occupied Ukraine. I hope this is okay to say. I know that politically there has been some pushback from conservatively Republican voters saying, you know what, we don't, that's Ukraine's problem. That's them over there. It doesn't affect America, and America needs to be first. And we need to put our emphasis and our efforts in building up America. But I think also if you spoke to this same group of people that, hey, Christians are being attacked for their faith, that might be a good leg or a handhold. I don't know what the right word is, but a good way to open up a deeper conversation, that what we're talking about truly is a fight between good and evil, between democracy and tyranny. And it is international, and it does affect all of us. It's not just something that's, quote, happening over there.
Well, Carol, I think you have to divide out the people that are radically invested in Christian nationalism in this country, which is extremely right-wing politics, from other Christians, whether they're even more toward Baptist or mainstream like Lutheran, Methodist, or Catholic and Orthodox. I think there's a divide among American Christians along those lines, and which is an unfortunate divide, but it's there, and we have to take it into consideration.
Yes, you make a valid point. Yeah.
With many very archaic and ancient divides we have today in the world, I might say.
Yeah.
Thank you all for participating in today's panel, and we will conclude by our customary greeting in Ukrainian from Dr. Shrey to our viewers in Ukraine.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці. До наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Героям слава!
Слава Україні!
Thank you.